Parrot repeats a stranger's name. What the owner discovers is chilling late one quiet evening. The Wilson household seemed at peace. The soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards were the only sounds breaking the stillness. In the corner of the living room sat a vibrant parrot named Charlie, his emerald green feathers gleaming under the soft glow of the lamp. Charlie was more than a pet. He was part of the family. His chatter and mimicry had been a source of joy and laughter for years. However, tonight Charlie was unusually quiet, perched motionless in his cage, his beady eyes scanning the room with an intensity that seemed almost human. Nina Wilson, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a nurturing heart, noticed the parrot's odd behavior. She approached the cage, her brow furrowed with concern. "Are you all right, Charlie?" she asked softly. Without warning, Charlie tilted, his head, his eyes locking onto Nina. Then, in a voice eerily similar to that of a stranger, he uttered a name. "Martin. Martin." Nina froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The name echoed in her mind, stirring memories she had long tried to bury. Martin was not a name commonly spoken in their home. In fact, it was the name of a man she barely knew, someone who had once entered her life briefly and left just as quickly. But why would Charlie repeat it now? "Martin," the parrot repeated, his tone filled with an unsettling mix of urgency and eeriness. Nina's mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. Could it be a coincidence? Parrots are known to mimic sounds and words they hear frequently, but Charlie had never spoken this name before. What was more disturbing was the realization that no one in the house had mentioned Martin in years. A chill ran down Nina's spine as she recalled the last time she had seen Martin. It was a fleeting encounter, but it had left an indelible mark on her. His piercing gaze, the cryptic smile, and the sense of unease she felt around him were memories she couldn't shake off. But why now? Why was Charlie bringing him up? As the clock struck midnight, Nina couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. She decided to dig deeper, determined to uncover the truth behind Charlie's strange behavior. Little did she know the discovery waiting for her would be far more chilling than she could have ever imagined. Nina sat down, her hands trembling, and began to piece together the puzzle. The parrot's repeated calls of Martin were not just random utterances. They were a clue, a message, but from whom and for what purpose? The mystery had only just begun, and Nina was about to embark on a journey that would unravel secrets long buried, forcing her to confront her deepest fears and face the shadows lurking in her past. Would you have been as curious as Nina? What would you do if your pet suddenly started repeating the name of a stranger? Stay with us as we dive deeper into this suspenseful tale where every word and every clue leads to a shocking revelation. The next morning, Nina woke up feeling restless. The unsettling events of the previous night played on a loop in her mind. She couldn't ignore Charlie's behavior. It felt like a sign, but a sign of what? Determined to get to the bottom of it, Nina decided to retrace her steps and revisit her past. The first thing she did was check her old photo albums and journals. As she flipped through the pages, a wave of nostalgia and unease washed over her. There, tucked between the pages of a worn-out journal, was a photo of Martin. His face was as she remembered, sharp features, dark eyes, and that enigmatic smile. But why had she kept it? Nina sat down at the dining table, staring at the photo. Memories of their brief interaction resurfaced. They had met at a charity event nearly a decade ago. Martin had been charming but reserved, always staying on the periphery of conversations. Nina remembered feeling a strange mix of attraction and wariness towards him. They had exchanged pleasantries, but nothing more. Then he vanished from her life as quickly as he had appeared. "Why now?" she murmured, her eyes drifting towards Charlie, who was watching her intently from his cage. Martin. the parrot repeated, this time with a softer, almost pleading tone. Nina's hands trembled as she decided to do something she hadn't done in years. Reach out to old acquaintances from the charity event. She made a few calls, hoping someone might remember Martin. After several fruitless attempts, she finally got a lead. An old friend, Margaret, vaguely remembered him and offered a cryptic comment. He wasn't someone you'd forget easily. There was something off about him. That only deepened the mystery. Nina's curiosity turned into obsession. She needed answers. Why was Charlie mimicking Martin's name? What connection did her parrot have with a man from her past? Later, that day, as Nina sat in her living room, scrolling through old messages and emails, she heard a soft, rustling sound. Turning her head, she saw Charlie hopping anxiously in his cage, his eyes fixed on the front door. "Martin, danger! Martin!" Charlie squawked, his voice filled with an urgency that sent chills down Nina's spine. Heart pounding, Nina approached the door and peered through the peephole. Nothing. The street was quiet, and there was no sign of anyone suspicious. Yet the unease lingered. She spent the next few days trying to piece together any information she could find about Martin. Internet searches yielded minimal results. A few outdated social media profiles, some random articles, but nothing concrete. It was as if he had vanished from the face of the earth after their encounter. One evening, as she was preparing dinner, Charlie's behavior took another strange turn. He began mimicking a series of sounds. Footsteps, a door creaking, and then the name again, Martin. Footsteps, danger. Nina felt her heart rate spike. The sounds were so lifelike, so precise. It was as if Charlie was replaying an event he had witnessed. But how? Had someone been in the house? Had Martin? Unable to shake the paranoia, Nina decided to set up a security camera in her living room. That night, she reviewed the footage meticulously. At first, everything seemed normal, but then she noticed something strange. Around midnight, Charlie became restless, hopping from perch to perch, his eyes darting around the room as if following an invisible presence. Then, just for a brief moment, a shadow appeared near the window, a fleeting silhouette that disappeared as quickly as it had come. Nina rewound the footage, her hands trembling. The shadow was there, unmistakable. Her mind raced with possibilities. Was she being watched? Had Martin somehow found her after all these years? And why would he? She remembered his mysterious demeanor and the unease he had stirred in her back then. The next day, Nina decided to visit the local library, hoping to find any old records or news articles that might shed light on Martin's past. As she sifted through the archives, she stumbled upon a chilling discovery, an old newspaper clipping about a man named Martin who had been involved in a series of unsolved disappearances years ago. The article was vague, but the description matched the man from her past. Nina's blood ran cold. Was this the same Martin? And if so, what did he want with her? Why had he suddenly resurfaced, and how did Charlie know about him? That night, Nina couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, her mind racing with fear and confusion. Around midnight, she heard it again, Charlie's urgent voice breaking the silence. "Martin, danger." Footsteps. Grabbing a flashlight, Nina crept down the stairs, her heart pounding in her chest. As she reached the living room, the air felt thick with tension. She turned on the light, her eyes scanning the room. Everything seemed in place, but the sense of being watched was overwhelming. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door, soft but deliberate. Nina froze, her heart hammering in her chest. She cautiously approached the door, her hand trembling as she reached for the doorknob. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice barely a whisper. Silence. She opened the door slowly, peering into the darkness. The street was empty, the only sound being the rustling of leaves in the night breeze. But on the doorstep lay an envelope, sealed and unmarked. Nina picked it up, her hands shaking. Inside was a single piece of paper with a message scrawled in bold letters. You can't escape the past. Nina's mind reeled. The message, the shadow, Charlie's strange behavior, it all pointed to something far more sinister than she could have ever imagined. Her quiet, peaceful life had been shattered, replaced by a terrifying mystery that seemed to tighten its grip with every passing day. But Nina wasn't one to back down. She was determined to uncover the truth, no matter how chilling it might be. The past was catching up to her, and it was time to face it head-on. Nina sat at the kitchen table, staring at the ominous message in her hands. The phrase, "You can't escape the past," echoed in her mind, amplifying her fear and confusion. What was it about Martin that had suddenly come crashing back into her life, and why now? The next day, Nina couldn't shake the sense of dread. She decided to take the envelope and its contents to the police, hoping they could provide some clarity or protection. The officer she spoke with, Detective Harper, was kind but cautious. "Do you have any idea who could have sent this?" Harper asked, studying the note carefully. Nina hesitated, then nodded. "I think it might be someone from my past, a man named Martin. We met briefly years ago, but I don't know much about him. He's been showing up in strange ways." "Through my Parrot?" Detective Harper raised an eyebrow. "Your Parrot?" Nina nodded, explaining how Charlie had been repeating Martin's name and other unsettling phrases. Harper seemed skeptical, but took down all the information. He promised to look into it, though his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. Feeling both relieved and anxious, Nina returned home. That night she sat in her living room, the silence around her almost suffocating. Charlie, usually her cheerful companion, seemed tense, his feathers puffed and eyes darting. "Martin, danger footsteps," he murmured again, sending shivers down Nina's spine. Determined to protect herself and find answers, Nina decided to search her house for anything unusual. She checked every room, every closet and every drawer, looking for signs of tampering or intruders. In the attic, she found a dusty old box labeled Memories. Inside were letters, photos, and keepsakes from her past, things she hadn't thought about in years. As she sifted through the contents, she came across a letter she didn't recognize. It was addressed to her, but signed by someone named M. The letter was cryptic, filled with vague references to unfinished business and veiled threats. Nina's heart raced as she realized this must be from Martin. But why would he send her a letter back then, only to resurface now? What unfinished business did he think they had? As she pondered these questions, the house phone rang, its shrill tone cutting through the stillness. Nina hesitated before answering, her heart pounding. "Hello?" she whispered. There was silence on the other end, followed by a faint, familiar voice. "Nina, it's time." The line went dead. Nina's hands shook as she hung up the phone. She felt trapped, the walls of her once safe home closing in around her. Determined not to let fear control her, she decided to confront her past head-on. She would find Martin and demand answers. The next day, Nina returned to the police station with the letter. Detective Harper examined it closely and promised to escalate the investigation. In the meantime, he advised Nina to stay vigilant and keep her doors locked. That evening, Nina sat in her living room, staring at the security footage from the previous nights. She noticed the shadow again, fleeting but unmistakable. It was near the window, just as before. Then she heard it, Charlie's voice, but this time it was different. "Martin. Coming. Now." Nina's heart leaped into her throat as a loud knock echoed through the house. She jumped, the sound reverberating in her ears. Grabbing her phone, she quickly dialed Detective Harper. "Detective, someone's at my door. I think it's him," she whispered frantically. "Stay inside, Nina. We're on our way," Harper assured her. Nina crept towards the door, peering through the peephole. This time, there was no one there. She opened the door cautiously, only to find another envelope. lying on the doorstep. She picked it up, her hands trembling, and opened it. Inside was a single photograph, a picture of her, taken from outside her house. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. Martin had been watching her, possibly, for days, maybe longer. She felt exposed, vulnerable, and terrified. Minutes later, the police arrived. Harper and his team swept the area, but there was no sign of Martin. Nina handed over the photo, her fear turning into determination. "We'll find him, Nina. He can't hide forever," Harper assured her. Over the next few days, Nina tried to go about her life, but the tension was palpable. Charlie continued to mimic the eerie phrases, his behavior becoming more erratic. Then, one evening, Nina had a breakthrough. While reviewing the footage again, she noticed something she had missed before. A figure in the shadows, wearing a distinctive coat. She recognized it instantly. It was the same coat Martin had worn at the charity event all those years ago. Nina called Detective Harper, who rushed over with his team. They analyzed the footage and confirmed that the figure was indeed Martin. With this new evidence, they were able to track him down to a nearby motel. The police surrounded the building and apprehended Martin without incident. Nina watched from a distance, relief washing over her as the man who had haunted her for weeks was finally taken into custody. As the truth unraveled, it turned out that Martin had become obsessed with Nina after their brief encounter. His reappearance was driven by a delusional belief that they were meant to be together. The letters, the surveillance, the cryptic messages, all part of his twisted plan to force her into his life. Nina was shaken, but relieved. The nightmare was finally over. Charlie, sensing the change in atmosphere, resumed his usual cheerful chatter, as if signaling the end of the ordeal. In the days that followed, Nina found solace in the support of her friends, the police, and her loyal companion, Charlie. She had faced her fears, confronted her past, and emerged stronger. The chilling chapter of her life had closed, leaving behind a story she would never forget. In the end, Nina realized that even in the darkest moments, there is light, and sometimes that light comes from the most unexpected sources, a persistent Parrot, a determined detective, and the courage to face the unknown. The days following Martin's arrest were a mix of relief and reflection for Nina. She felt a weight lifted off her shoulders, but the emotional toll lingered. Her quiet home, once filled with unease, began to feel safe again. Charlie, her faithful companion, returned to his usual self, chirping and mimicking happier phrases. His playful antics and cheerful demeanor were a stark contrast to the tension that had once filled the air. Nina found comfort in his presence, realizing how instrumental he had been in uncovering the truth. One morning, as sunlight streamed through the windows, Nina sat with a cup of tea, reflecting on the past few weeks. She had faced her fears and uncovered a mystery that had haunted her, all with the help of an unlikely ally, her parrot. The thought brought a smile to her face. The community rallied around Nina, offering support and encouragement. Detective Harper kept in touch, updating her on the case and ensuring she felt secure. The ordeal had brought unexpected friendships and a renewed sense of resilience in Nina. As days turned into weeks, life slowly returned to normal. Nina decided to focus on the things she loved: her art, her friends, and of course Charlie. She spent more time outdoors, rediscovering the beauty of her garden and the joy of simple moments. One evening, Nina sat down with Charlie, gently stroking his feathers. "We've been through a lot, haven't we?" she whispered. Charlie tilted, his head letting out a soft squawk as if agreeing. Nina chuckled, feeling a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. Despite the fear and uncertainty, she had emerged stronger, and the bond with her feathered friend had grown even deeper as the sun set, casting a golden glow over the room. Nina felt a sense of peace. The past was behind her, and she was ready to embrace the future. She looked at Charlie, who seemed to share her sentiment, perched contentedly on her shoulder. In the end, Nina thought, it wasn't just about uncovering the mystery. It was about finding strength, trust, and the unbreakable bond between us. With a contented sigh, she whispered, "Thank you, Charlie. You truly are my hero."